Uh, there are 4 ways, and only 4 ways, in which we have contact with the world. We are evaluated and classified by those 4 contacts: what we do, how we look, what we say, and how we say it.
Mm.
That is a quote by Dale Carnegie. And usually, when people quote Carnegie, it's all about winning friends or influencing people in business. But this specific quote,
It hits a bit differently, doesn't it?
it really does. It's almost ominous.
Yeah, it creates this sense of constant surveillance.
Mm.
It implies that every single output from your body or your mind is just this data point being judged by the world.
Exactly. It's not just, oh, did I use the right grammar? It's that our entire existence is mediated through these signals.
Right.
But today, for this deep dive, I want to take that idea and really just tear it apart. We aren't just looking at how to speak well, we're looking at the actual machinery of connection.
The nuts and bolts.
Yeah, the models, some of which are surprisingly rigid and mathematical, as we'll see. The models that try to explain how a thought in my head ends up in yours. And inevitably, how that entire machine gets jammed up by the massive invisible force of culture.
And that jamming is really where the story lies. Because if communication were just about data transfer, we'd be fine. We'd be computers.
Right.
But it's not. It's about meaning. I mean, the word itself, communication, it comes from the Latin root communicare.
Which translates to make common, right?
Yes. To make common. It's inherently a communal act. It's this deep drive to take something totally private, like a feeling, an idea, a fear, and make it shared property.
And that urge is ancient. The source material draws this incredible line from the cave paintings in Lascaux in France and the rock art at Uluru in Australia right up to the modern day.
It's the exact same impulse.
Which is a fascinating trajectory when you think about it. You start with ochre on a cave wall, you move to smoke signals, then to carrier pigeons in World War I.
Well, the pigeon thing is wild.
Right. I know. Sidebar, the fact that military intelligence literally relied on bird navigation is a whole other deep dive we need to do.
Definitely.
But you go from pigeons, and now we have fiber optics. But the argument here is that while the tech changed, the actual architecture of the interaction hasn't.
Not at all. The fundamental components remain absolutely identical. Whether you're sending a pigeon across a battlefield or just shooting off a Slack message, you are engaging in a process with 8 distinct parts.
8 parts.
Yeah. And I think this is where we usually just glaze over. We think, I talk, you listen, boom, done.
Right, but the breakdown of those parts is where all the failures happen.
Exactly.
So let's dismantle that engine. We have the source, obviously. That's me or whoever is initiating. But the source material makes a really interesting distinction between conscious and non-conscious intent here.
Yeah, because you might consciously intend to ask for a cup of coffee, but non-consciously, your tone, your posture, or maybe a slight grimace, that is also sourcing information.
You are broadcasting on multiple frequencies simultaneously?
All the time. You can't turn it off.
Okay, so I have this intent. Then I have to turn it into a message. This is the encoding phase. And honestly, reading through the research, this feels like the first major point of failure.
Oh, absolutely. It is the first major distortion. Think about it. You have a complex, nuanced feeling, maybe a mix of frustration and hunger and exhaustion, and you have to compress all of that into a very limited set of symbols. Words. Gestures.
It's like trying to play a symphony on a kazoo.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
So you encode it, and then it goes into a channel.
Which would be sound waves, or text on a screen, or physical touch.
Right. And it travels through that channel to the receiver. But then comes the other side of the coin, which is decoding.
This is the translation software running in the other person's head.
And here's the kicker. That software is never fully updated to match yours.
Never.
This is where the concept of noise becomes so critical. In the engineering sense, noise is literally static on a telephone line. But in human communication, noise is everything else. It's the fact that the receiver is hungry, or they have a headache, or maybe they have a subconscious bias against your accent.
Or they're just thinking about what they're going to say next instead of listening.
Precisely. All of that is noise interfering with the decoding process, and the loop only closes with the 8th component, which is feedback.
The nod, the frown, the reply text.
Exactly. And all 8 of these things happen within a specific context. You cannot strip the interaction from its environment.
Because a whisper in a quiet library means something totally different than a whisper in a dark alley.
Completely different meaning. Same channel, same volume, different context.
The thing that really stood out to me in the reading is the idea that this whole process is dynamic. It's not a static exchange of files. The source quoted the philosopher Heraclitus. You cannot step into the same river twice.
It's such a profound observation for communication theory. Once you say a word, the shared reality between us is shifted. You can't hit undo on a spoken sentence.
Right, you can apologize, but you can't unsay it.
Exactly. The relationship has evolved, even if it's just microscopically. The river has flowed on.
And the water in that river is essentially made of symbols.
Right. Communication is inherently symbolic. We all just kind of collectively agree that the sound cat refers to a furry feline. There is no logical reason for it. It's just an arbitrary agreement.
But those agreements are fragile, right?
Very.
The classic example being the pat on the head.
Oh, that is a perfect demonstration of symbolic failure. So in the US or Australia, you pat a child on the head. The symbol decodes naturally as affection or praise. Good job, kid.
But you take that exact same physical action to Thailand.
And the decoding is a severe violation. In Thai culture, the head is considered the seat of the soul. It is the most sacred part of the body. To touch it is a grave insult.
So the action, the channel, the message, it was identical. But the decoding was totally inverted because the symbolic library was different. This brings us to how we've historically tried to map all this chaos. Because for a long time, the models we used to explain communication were, well, they were incredibly robotic.
They were quite literal. We're talking about the linear model here, which is often called the transmission model. This was developed by Shannon and Weaver back in 1949. And it's really important to remember who these guys were. They weren't psychologists. They were engineers at Bell Labs.
They were just trying to make telephones work better.
Exactly. They just wanted to know how to get an electronic signal from point A to point B with maximum fidelity. So their model is basically a pipeline. Source sends, receiver gets. Success is measured entirely by clarity.
It treats human communication like shipping a FedEx package. Did the box arrive? Yes. Was it damaged? No. Great, 5 stars.
But it completely ignores meaning. If I yell an advanced chemical formula at you and you hear every single syllable perfectly, the linear model says we communicated flawlessly.
But if I don't know the first thing about chemistry, we haven't communicated at all. I just heard sounds.
Exactly. Which leads us to the interactive model. This came later with Wilbur Schramm in the 1970s. And this is where the theory actually starts to look like real human behavior.
Right. Schramm brought some humanity into the math.
He introduced 2 vital shifts. First, he said it's a two-way street. Encoding and decoding happens simultaneously. As you speak to me right now, I'm sending feedback, I'm nodding, my posture is engaged. We are building the meaning together in real time.
But the real game changer in Schramm's model, and I think this is the pivot point for our whole deep dive today, is this concept he called the field of experience.
Yes, this is the key to everything. The model admits that we aren't just blank slates or empty hard drives. We each stand inside our own field of experience. And this includes your upbringing, your past trauma, your education, your values, the books you've read, everything.
So when I encode a message, I'm wrapping it up in my field of experience. And when you decode it, you're unwrapping it through yours.
And where those 2 fields overlap, that tiny Venn diagram in the middle, that's the only place true communication actually happens. If our fields don't overlap much, say, I'm a quantum physicist and you're a poet, or I'm from rural Japan, you're from urban Brazil, the overlap is tiny. And that lack of overlap is where the friction creates heat.
And the biggest, heaviest architect of that field of experience is culture.
Without a doubt, culture is the blueprint.
So let's open that suitcase. The source material uses this great analogy from Carly Dodd. He says, culture is like the luggage we carry.
It's a very sticky metaphor. We carry it everywhere. We usually don't even notice the weight of it, and we definitely try to unpack it on everyone we meet.
We just start handing out our folded shirts to strangers. But what's actually inside the luggage, Dodd breaks it down into layers, kind of like an onion or the layers of the earth. Yeah. You've got the inner core, the intermediate layer, and the outer layer.
Let's start from the outside and work our way in.
Yeah.
The outer layer is the objective culture, the institutional stuff.
The things you can point to.
Right. Economic systems, political structures, healthcare, family laws, religion. This is the visible, tangible scaffolding of a society.
Then you peel that back and go one level deeper to the intermediate layer.
These are the cultural activities, the rituals, the customs. The source explicitly mentions the bunad, which is the Norwegian national costume.
Right, which isn't just clothes. It signals your specific region, your family history, your status. It's literally a communication device worn on the body.
Exactly. Or look at the Dutch celebration of Queen's Day, or even just the global passion for football. These are activities that bind people together. They are the expressions of the culture.
But then you peel that back and you hit the inner core, the magma in the center of the earth.
This is the subjective culture, the invisible part. These are the deep beliefs, the values, the worldviews, the history. This is the hardest part to see, and crucially, the hardest part to change.
The reading brought up a really compelling example of how these layers interact, or I guess fail to interact, using Russia right after the fall of the Soviet Union.
Oh, this is a perfect case study in the dynamic nature of culture, because culture is holistic. You touch one part, it affects the rest. So in 1991, the Soviet Union collapses. The outer layer, the political and economic system, changes practically overnight. Communism is out, capitalism is in.
And that outer shockwave forced a rapid change in the intermediate layer. Suddenly you have Western fashion flooding in, pop music, aggressive advertising. The text mentions figures like Ksenia Sobchak.
Right, the socialite TV personality.
Yeah, she represented this totally new, glitzy, highly individualistic era on the surface.
But here is where the friction happens. You can change the government, which is the outer layer, and you can change the clothes, the intermediate layer, in just a few years. But the inner core.
The subjective culture.
Yes. The deep-seated values of communalism, the historical suspicion of extreme wealth, the specific Russian worldview developed over centuries, that moves at the speed of a glacier.
So you end up with a society where the visual intermediate signals are screaming Western capitalism, but the decoding software in the inner core is still running on a much older operating system.
And that creates immense cultural dissonance. It explains why simply importing a political system or a corporate business model into a new country rarely works seamlessly. You're trying to run brand new software on old, incompatible hardware.
Which brings us directly to the intersection of all of this. It's when that subjective inner core dictates the actual rules of communication, because culture essentially hands us the rule book for how to encode and decode every interaction.
It creates what we call the logic of interaction. And when two different logics collide head-on, you get situations like the case of the silent technician.
Let's walk through that one. This was a specific study in the source involving an American manager and a Chinese technician.
Right. So picture the scene. A crucial machine breaks down on the factory floor. It's loud, production is stopped, it's highly stressful. The American manager is standing there, looking at the machine, waiting for a solution. The Chinese technician is there, he knows exactly why the machine is broken, but he stands there in complete silence. He doesn't immediately offer the fix.
Now, let's run the old linear model on this. The American is the receiver waiting for a signal. He gets silence. He decodes that silence as, this guy doesn't know what to do.
Or he decodes it as, he is incompetent, or he just doesn't care. Because the American's inner core values assertiveness, rapid problem solving, and speed above all. For the manager, silence is a vacuum that urgently needs to be filled with action.
But inside the technician's inner core.
The code is completely different. He is operating on the deep cultural concept of face.
Right. Modesty and respect.
Exactly. If he speaks up too quickly and fixes it effortlessly, he might imply that the manager is negligent for letting it break in the first place. Or he might be showing off, waiting to be formally invited to speak so he doesn't appear arrogant. In his inner core, his silence is an active, deliberate sign of profound respect.
That is just tragic in a way.
Yeah.
The technician is actively performing deference, and the manager is decoding it as incompetence.
That is the field of experience gap in action. They are both behaving completely rationally within their own webs of significance, but the result is a total operational breakdown.
Another massive area where this rationality clashes is time, chronemics.
Time feels like physics to most of us, right?
Yeah.
A second is a second, no matter where you are. But culturally, time is a language all its own.
We have the monochronic cultures. This is mostly us in the West, Northern Europe, North America. Time is a straight line. It's a finite resource. Time is money.
We slice it up, we save it, we spend it, we waste it. In a monochronic culture like Germany or the Netherlands, if we have a meeting scheduled for 2:00 p.m. and you show up at 2:05 or 2:10 p.m., you haven't just missed 5 minutes. You have committed a moral error.
You have literally stolen something from me.
Yes. Bad manners, plain and simple.
But then you look at polychronic cultures. Latin America, parts of Africa, Malaysia, the Mediterranean.
There, time is fluid. It's cyclical. The priority isn't the clock on the wall, it's the human relationship right in front of you.
The source material makes this incredible point that if you are in a polychronic setting, being rigidly on time might actually be considered rude.
Exactly. Because it implies you value a schedule over people. Imagine you run into an old dear friend on the street on your way to a business meeting. In a monochronic culture, you say, hey, great to see you, I gotta run, I'm late, let's catch up later. You cut the human tie to save the schedule.
Because the schedule is God.
Fine.
But in a polychronic culture,
To cut that conversation short is a massive insult. It says, this arbitrary meeting time is more important to me than our shared history. So you stay, you talk, you ask about their family, and you arrive late to the meeting.
and the person waiting for you at the meeting,
If they share that polychronic inner core, they totally understand. They assume you were delayed by something human, something valid. You were tending to the social fabric.
but if a monochronic manager from Chicago is waiting for a polychronic employee in Brazil,
War breaks out. The manager sees a lazy, disorganized employee. The employee sees a cold, inhuman, robotic boss.
it really seems like these inner cores are just designed to keep us permanently separated. But there was one example in the research that actually offered a bit of a counter-narrative, which I loved, the telenovelas.
Oh, yes. This is one of my absolute favorite oddities in cultural studies. The massive, unprecedented success of Brazilian soap operas in post-Soviet Russia.
Specifically shows like The Rich Also Cry and Slay Bazora.
Right. Now, on paper, using everything we just talked about, this makes zero sense. You have tropical Brazil and snowy post-communist Russia. Completely different languages, drastically different histories.
They're intermediate layers or worlds apart. The food, the clothes, the weather, totally alien.
So why were millions of Russian grandmothers glued to their televisions watching Veronica Castro?
Because the inner core resonated.
Exactly. The intermediate stuff was exotic window dressing, sure, but the deep thematic code suffering, the absolute sanctity of the family unit, the melodramatic struggle against an unfair fate, the deep emotional expressiveness that mapped perfectly onto the Russian soul.
The Russian soul and the Latin soul actually found a bridge.
They did. It proved that while the cultural luggage looks drastically different on the outside, there are these universal emotional frequencies underneath. The intermediate layer was different, but the inner core found a match. Mass media basically became a global decoder ring.
So if we pull back and look at this whole picture for you listening, the machinery, the noise, the cultural luggage, the layers, what is the real takeaway here? Because we can't just walk around analyzing every single handshake and late arrival like we're academic anthropologists. We'd never get anything done.
No, we wouldn't. But we can actively stop being linear communicators living in an interactive world. We tend to operate on this arrogant autopilot. I said it clearly, therefore you must have understood it.
We assume our field of experience is the default setting for the universe.
Right. The real practical insight here is to recognize that when you feel friction in an interaction, when that technician is standing there silently or that colleague is 10 minutes late, your instant knee-jerk reaction is a judgment based purely on your own inner core. They are rude. They are dumb. They are lazy.
And the deep dive move is to pause and ask, wait, is this a coding error?
Exactly. Is this just noise? Is their cultural luggage packed completely differently than mine? It's about moving from instant judgment to genuine curiosity. You have to actively try to see the subjective culture, the inner core of the other person.
It sounds like we need to be a little less like the Bell Labs engineers optimizing a wire, and a little more like the Russian grandmothers watching Brazilian TV. Look for the shared humanity underneath the weird, confusing signals.
That is a really beautiful way to synthesize it.
Well, before we sign off, I know you had a final thought on the nature of this web of culture we're all caught up in.
Yes, I do. It comes from Clifford Geertz, who is a tremendously influential anthropologist. He defined a culture as a web of significance that man himself has spun.
We spin the web, and then we get stuck in it.
That's the ultimate paradox. We literally invent these rules, these arbitrary symbols, these meanings, but then we let them govern us as if they were laws of physics. So the provocative thought I'd leave you with to mull over is this: if you spun the web, are you the master of it, or are you the victim of it? And when you try to communicate with someone from a totally different web, are you just trying to violently pull them into yours? Or are you brave enough to step out into the void between the webs and try to build something entirely new?
Are you the spider or the fly? That is definitely something to chew on. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. We'll see you next time.